Welcome to the ultimate podcast experience with conversations about politics, religion, finances, and the meaning of life, and all the other subjects and stories that Nana told you not to bring to the kitchen table, and a whole lot more. Join our hosts, James the Red, Eule B. Bach, and Sam the slippery smooth producer as they settle the ultimate question: have y'all heard about this?
My therapist said that she thinks I have a problem with vengeance.
Yeah, I think you did that for your search engine. So
Dodged a snake there.
And literally, when you had a little 8-year-old get convinced to go in and get baptized in the fire truck.
hand me your keys. You're driving your bicycle back to Tuscaloosa.
The tube of demons.
For the sake of this podcast, I'm going to try to save our viewers and listeners from that.
We've run out of things to talk about.
It's just got to be kind of awkward.
I still thought this was a joke.
We're rolling.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. So, how have y'all been today?
Well, I just woke up.
I've been up for 35 minutes, so
The last 6.5
Great.
hours was great.
So, hey, I just want to do a little housekeeping before we get started.
Okay.
We got a review for our podcast, and
Like not just a
is-
star, but somebody wrote something.
Yeah, somebody wrote something. So, it was
Sweet.
from a Cleo Schwab. It's Klaus Schwab. Actually wrote us a review.
Oh,
So it's
I
one
knew
star.
it.
How
I
can you
knew
take
it.
the
Star.
time from this guy is busy ruling the world and turning it into his own little...
Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum said, the reports, so 1-star review, the reports of my desire for people to eat the bugs was greatly exaggerated. If the renters of the world want to eat tasty bugs, that is their decision.
the renters of the world.
Yeah, so.
You will own nothing and be happy. You will not own
So,
property.
Clau, I definitely appreciate the feedback. I wish we could have earned a little bit better than just a 1-star. But
I
that's-
want to go in and write like a refutation to that, a
Okay,
remonstrance.
yeah.
Can we do that?
I can't believe that of our 50 downloads that one of those was an international listen.
International, I know.
Pretty
it's
cool.
pretty-
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
What do you think about Americans? I only know 3.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, if you're listening and you would like to leave us a review and honest feedback, we want to be good. We want for you to want to listen. So leave a good review. Don't deflate us too bad. But let us know what you think. Like us, follow us, subscribe. Is that a thing? Subscribe?
Yeah,
Or is that a YouTube
they can
thing?
subscribe on Apple Podcasts or YouTube
Spotify.
or Spotify. I don't know what Spotify does.
Yeah, it's on there. It's on there. HYHAT, HYHAT. This is the HYHAT podcast. And if you want to listen, share,
Share for sure.
and give us some feedback, by all means. We're talking about a lot of y'all, and you don't even know it.
I will say this: if you get your podcast through Spotify, if you say anything that the three of us disagree with, we're pulling our shows off Spotify.
We are.
We're going to
Yeah.
Neil Young you. So don't say anything that we don't think is appropriate.
Yeah, if we disagree with you,
Yeah, you're done.
You're in big trouble. Big listener trouble. You will not.
Neil Young and Schwab,
that coffee?
Klaus Schwab, they're all buddies.
You will
Yeah.
not be able to listen to us or Neil Young. I think he didn't.
What
He
if he'll
come back
write us
on
a review
Spotify
next week?
I just switched over to the other platform and listened. So there's a funny thing about Neil Young is I really like a lot of his music.
Oh, when I was growing up, I loved Neil Young.
But I was when I grew up, I was kind of taught because Leonard Skinner didn't like him, because of his song Southern Man,
Right.
that I shouldn't like him. And then I grew up and I'm like, that's actually musically a very good song. I mean, not all stories do you agree with, or maybe some of them you just don't want to hear. But nonetheless, the music's good.
But I always thought, I guess I didn't really know the whole backstory growing up and listening to Leonard Skinner. That one line in the Sweet Home Alabama where it says, I hope Mr. Young will remember a Southern man don't need him around anyhow.
Right.
And I thought, well, they're kind of bantering back and forth. I always just like, they're just, they're kind of picking at each other, but in a professional way. They still agree with each other's ability to speak their minds. Of course, Neil Young, I guess, has changed now. He's like, if you don't say something I like, then you're done. which is sad. I mean, it's sad that we've kind of devolved into that in this country.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, people want to control their own fiefdom. And so
Right.
if you know, your music is that, if your music is your power that you have, then, you know, people feel like, Sam, if you mess with it, you're going to be in big trouble.
Sam cannot stop fidgeting with his microphone this morning.
Move your body, not your equipment.
I was having to move my
This is
body
not a
down.
golf club.
It's all those veggies. His brain is hardwired to like.
Why are you wiggling up there,
scrambled this
Sam?
morning.
Are you having one of those bean moments? Had a big can of
I don't know why
refried
Eule
beans
has
for
the need
breakfast.
to control everything this morning.
Tell your dad joke. My favorite dad joke you tell is about these speed bumps that somebody put out here.
So we, right outside of our church, we have the street, and it used to be a pass through. It connected two pretty big streets, and so I guess people would go too fast, through this connection, which I never thought. I mean, I don't know, 50 miles an hour on a residential street doesn't seem too fast to me, but that's just me. Anyway, they put some speed humps, and I was so angry, because you're coming into church. There's literally 12 speed humps on this little street to get into our church now.
Oh yeah.
And
I know what you're talking about.
so they put the one right up here, and it just, it made me so mad when they put that speed hump there. But I'm slowly getting over it.
I love that one. That's a great one. When it comes to the time change, the spring forward thing, and I understand there are some rational thought behind it. And here's what I've always been told. And if you get up this morning like we did at say 6:30, we were driving at 6:30. It's dark.
Yeah.
And a lot of school buses are rolling around 6:30 or 7 o'clock picking up kids. And so I've always been told that the rationale for doing that in the wintertime or whenever we do it is to give the daylight hour earlier so that the kids don't have to wait in the dark for the school bus.
Well, it's definitely not the case. So it was for farmers so that they could have more daylight at the end of the day.
Listen, anybody
You
that
grew
tells
up in
you
rural
that,
Alabama.
anybody that tells you it has something to do with farming is, that has anything to do with when the daylight is, that's like the worst argument in the world. I mean, like the sun rises and the sun sets. It doesn't matter what the clock says. If you're a farmer, I'm sorry, you just get up.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Work in the daylight, go to bed.
I am so, I looked up, it's 20%. The hospital sees 21% more cases of heart attacks right after the spring daylight savings time, the spring forward.
No
and they
way.
see, I'm not even
Serious?
joking,
Can you cite your source?
20% less. It's Wikipedia.
It's the CDC.
It's the CDC.
Anthony Fauci says.
So this is hospitals that report this. And then they see it was either 20 or 21% decrease in the fall back, when you gain an hour of sleep. So
it evens out.
potentially, oh God.
That's awful.
Well, hey,
How about just stop messing with stuff and just leave it the way it
throws
is?
off people's circadian rhythms.
there's an old Indian saying that the American Indian said, only the white man would think that you can take a blanket, cut 6 inches off the top of the blanket, sew the same inches 6 inches to the bottom of the blanket, and have a longer blanket. And that's exactly what we're doing.
Didn't we give the Indians blankets?
I think we took their blankets.
That's a false one. We didn't have germ theory back then.
No, but
Anthony Fauci wasn't around to give smallpox to the Indians.
well, I think what you said, Sam, about the heart attacks, maybe the mental health stuff, I would have viewed that. I would have guessed totally the opposite, because for me, when the time falls back, that starts a little bit of a seasonal depression, and then when it springs forward, I told somebody yesterday that the Spring Forward Day is like in my top 5 holidays. Like, it's right behind Christmas, Halloween, my birthday, 4th of July, and the day that we spring forward. I love knowing the days are longer.
I'm with you.
I love it.
I
I know spring is coming. I know that I'm going to get to play golf till 9 o'clock sometimes. And I just love this time of year. It's my favorite time of year, easily.
It's probably why you're a more successful person than I am.
Success. Let's define that today on the podcast.
Well, I think the issue is it throws off everybody's circadian rhythms. If you have kids, which y'all both do, I have kids too, it throws them off. I'm sure it throws off the animals. I can't even imagine dogs. Like, you're getting fed an hour later. You know what I mean? I'm serious. It's got to affect them.
Okay,
They have a
yeah.
time.
If you have a farmer that's that regimented, it's like, wait a minute, I used to get my slop
Jer-
in
Jer-
the slop bucket at 8,
Jerry-
now it's at 9.
Jerry Clower tells a story about a salesman that comes through and starts talking to him about this new feed, and he's going to, you need to be giving this feed to your cows. And he goes, well, why? He goes, well, they digest it faster and they, blah, blah, blah. He gives him all these reasons. And he goes, and ultimately he said they'll mature faster, and they'll, have meat on them faster and they'll be full grown faster and all this. And the farmer looks at the salesman and he goes, what's time to a cow?
Speaking of food, I started a new diet.
Dogs.
I started a whiskey.
I'm worried about the dogs.
I started a whiskey only diet.
Oh,
Yeah, I've already lost 3 days.
I want to say these people's names, but I don't want to call them out. But one of my favorite kind of quips about that, like that, James, is somebody asked a friend, did he want a shot of Jägermeister? And he said, no, I have somewhere to be day after tomorrow. This same person was pulled over one time and actually, true story, got a DUI. But when the officer pulled him over, he said, have you had anything to drink? And he said, I've had a beer. He said, I'm not going to call you a liar, but if you've only had a beer, you drank it out of a 5-gallon bucket.
Man, did I ever tell you about the time I got pulled over when I was 15 years old? So I was, a lot of my really bad stories in childhood always start with me and my friend Sean. You always have that one friend. And Sean was not a bad kid, and I was not a bad kid, but if you put Sean and me together, It was awful.
Bad news.
Yeah, and so this one time, we were both 15. His mom was out of town for some kind of work conference or something, and so she had this little work truck at our house that she used to haul garbage off or whatever. So Sean and I were both 15 years old. We both had driver's permits. And so I said, Sean, let's go get that truck. Or maybe he said, hey, James, let's go get that truck. However it happened, we took the truck.
Yeah.
And it was like 11 o'clock at night. We said, let's go out for a little drive. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. So we get in the truck. We actually wrangle another buddy from the neighborhood to get in with us. So there's 3 of us in this truck. We're driving down the road, and I get pulled over by a city police officer in our little town that we lived in, Saudi Daisy, Tennessee.
Oh, man.
This police officer pulls me over, and, you got that awkward 30 seconds to a minute or so, maybe a little longer, where you're just sitting there and the lights are just, flashing behind you.
Trying to figure out your lie.
What are we going to do? And so Sean and I were both pretty composed. This other kid was freaking out, like squirming, crying, like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I was like, shut your mouth. It's going to be okay. Just shut up. So a few minutes later, we get this officer walks up to the car, and I still had the window open. He was like, I was hand cranking the window down, because this is early 1990s, and he was like, "Where are you going?" And I was like, "Well, we're going over to a friend's house, officer." And he said, "Well, let me see your license." And I said, "Well, I have a permit." And I said, and my friend Sean here has a permit. So if you put 2 permits together,
Oh my God.
that's like a license. So he took them and he looked at them for a few minutes, and then he just looked at us and he goes, "Just get going where you need to go and get off the road and let us go."
Well, he's probably holding back laughter.
I got pulled over last week.
Oh.
Yep. On my way to Cleveland, Tennessee, going down the interstate, had cruise control on. Like, I was being very obedient, and for some reason, talk about, and I've got a friend who, shout out to him, David Little, currently running for city council in Huntsville, Alabama. Best campaign slogan you've ever heard: vote big, vote little.
Oh.
Did you hear that? Vote big, vote little. David Little.
His opponent, his opponent is Nathan Big.
That.
And the reason I call him into this conversation is because David was a victim of a head-on collision maybe about a decade or so ago, where a young man was distracted driving on his phone and crossed over the center line and hit him and his family head-on, and really put David in a bad way.
Gosh.
Hospitalized, broken legs, I think. He's recovered, but he's a big advocate now for like hands-free bills and like don't be on these things driving. It's very dangerous, and he has a passionate plea behind that. But the other day, as I told you, I'm on the interstate on cruise control fine, and my phone rings. I put my AirPods in, and the second I started talking, you know what I did? My foot hit the accelerator. Like I was totally not paying attention to the mechanics of what I was doing again because I was distracted. And that was hands-free. But it was still that distraction. So it opened my eyes a little bit. But what I did was I had passed a car, and there was a black SUV up in the left-hand lane ahead of me, which is my biggest pet peeve in the world. Is if you're not passing, get out of the left-hand lane.
If you're not passing someone.
So I'm going to show this guy what's what. And so I whip around the right of him, and he was an unmarked Chattanooga police officer who quickly
showed him.
Let me know that the reason he was in the left-hand lane was because he was radaring oncoming traffic.
Wait, he actually said that?
No. He just pulled me over. What he did say was I not going fast enough for you? And I just totally, gave the exact. And if you're ever pulled over, do as I am telling you right now. Put your hands on the wheel, say yes, sir, be respectful, and just be totally respectful.
Especially, it sounds like
don't admit guilt. That's the biggest thing.
I was like, dude, I said I wasn't paying attention. I stepped on it. I'd passed that car. I was not paying attention, and I'm sorry. Like I had it on. I said I actually had it on cruise control, and then I said I just.
Then my wife called, and I was in a hurry to get to the store.
So what you don't want to do? My wife had a coworker that did this.
He wrote me a warning, by the way.
Good. Okay. Yeah, and some cops are cool, but you don't want to do, and what I mean don't admit guilt, is my wife had a coworker that he got pulled over. The cop comes up and he's like, "Why did I pull you over?" And he goes, "Well, I think it's because I rolled through that like red light back there."
Oh my god!
And he's like, "Well, I actually pulled you over for speeding, but I'm also going to write you a ticket for the red light."
It's like some that's if you get a police officer with a penchant for vengeance.
Yeah,
that's awful.
This is why I don't live in Georgia.
I wonder if every time we got pulled over, we just said, "Look, I'm not going to say a thing. I want my attorney. I want my lawyer."
I kind of do that. With the times I've been pulled over, they'll be like, "So, I'm pulling you over because you did this and this," and I just go, "Okay."
We know you get conditioned. You watch Hollywood or you watch these TV shows, and everybody that ever wants to lawyer up, they're always guilty. And so it's almost like you've got this indoctrination into you from a young age.
So true.
If you ask for a lawyer, that automatically means you're guilty.
Yeah.
Well, I think the big thing, too, is making them feel safe. And I think people don't think about that. It's like when I was looking at my insurance one time when I got pulled over, I had my hands out the window on my phone just because it's like he was back there. I'm like, this is an easy way to make them feel safe because he
probably thought you were videoing him.
I did tell him as he wrote, so I got my warning. I thanked him. And I said, "Hey, I appreciate you guys." And I said, I want you to try to stay safe out here. And I said, I never would have mentioned this before the transaction, but I go to church with one of you guys, great guy. And I mentioned him by name, so I didn't name drop and then hope to get out of it.
Yeah.
And I would have probably done that even had he given me a ticket. I would have reacted the exact same way had I gotten a ticket. I will say at 46, a ticket does not impact my life like it might have when I was 16. With that, it's like,
permits.
okay, that would another $150, and like
I think
you
the
just
first
move on.
insurance policy my parents ever took out on me for driving was about $1,200 a year is what it cost. And that was back in like 90s.
Wow. So now that we've gone down this road, the first time I ever got a speeding ticket was 1 hour from the second time I ever got a speeding ticket.
Are you serious?
I was on my way. I was a student at the University of Alabama, headed home, and I was speeding. 82 is my magic number. That's where I always get clocked. And I'm driving home, Fayette County, Alabama. A state trooper pulls me over, 82 and a 55, writes me a ticket. And I kind of beg him not to. Like, my parents are going to kill me. Insurance will go up. Please don't write this. He's like, "Look, dude, if you were doing 62 or 70, you're doing 82. Like, you're getting a ticket."
Right.
So he writes me the ticket, which makes me late, because I had to pull over for 6 or 7 more minutes.
Yep.
And so I'm almost home. I'm going bowling with my parents that night, and that's what I'm trying to make it to this event. And I'm in Russellville or Littleville, Alabama. They're one and the same, and they will both light you up with a speeding ticket. And I start easily, gradually getting faster, and I get pulled over again. And he comes up, and I said, "Please don't write me a ticket." And he goes, "Give me one good reason why I should not write you a ticket." And I showed him that other ticket, And he looked at it and he said, "You got this an hour ago?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "And obviously did not learn your lesson." He wrote me up. So I go to my parents that night. My mom, was always a lot more graceful to me for my mistakes than my dad. And I said, "Mom, Dad, I've got some bad news and worse news." And, "Well, what's the bad news?" I said, "I got a ticket on the way home." And my dad goes, "A ticket? What could be worse than that?" And I said, "Well, an hour later, I got another one." He goes, "Hand me your keys. You're driving your bicycle back to Tuscaloosa."
Oh my goodness! How did the bowling go that night?
No, fine.
No.
And I had my keys back by the end of it. There was always that shock value, but there was never any follow through with that kind of punishment.
Yeah. It's like I was just joking.
But I went to driving school to get at least one of those. I think it didn't count, but
I did the same thing.
yeah. And there with a bunch of drunks.
Yeah.
I've been to driving school 17 times.
I made some good friends.
It comes with these DUIs.
What does it mean if you get a written warning? Like, why would there be a written? Why wouldn't he just say, "Go on home, dude"? And
Yeah, I don't know. In the
think it's
computer,
so they can
in the
reference
computer
it
age,
back.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think back in the day, maybe you could just toss it out the window. But I think today with the computerized, I think there would be a record if I got pulled over again within. They're gonna, dude,
Yeah.
like, come on, you just got a warning today. You get a ticket.
Yeah, I think it's so that they can. I kind of did this I used to be managing several employees, and I did that with there was coaching conversations we had at
you gave them a written verbal warning.
Yeah, it was like a written verbal warning. Yeah, but yeah, so it's like, hey, if you just made a mistake, then no big deal. But then if you do it again, we know it wasn't a mistake, and then we
Right.
can throw the book at you.
Right.
Sam comes in with a vengeance. By the way, my therapist just said that she thinks I have a problem with vengeance, and I was like, we'll see about that.
Hey, so time change. We've been given a little bit of feedback on our podcast that we're a little all over the place. So we're going to try for you, the loyal listening audience, to narrow down some of our topics. We're not making promises. We're only going to tell you we're going to try. So we came today. We put deep thought throughout the week into what we're going to talk about. And then we get here, and 5 minutes before the podcast, we're like, let's talk about this instead. But one of the topics that we want to talk about today is near and dear to my heart because of springtime. And I want to talk a little bit about snakes.
Okay.
Maybe not in the way that you're thinking I want to talk about snakes, but springtime is crazy because snakes are everywhere. They're starting to hatch and come out. Little babies are running. And we do a lot of hiking with the kids, and even last year there was a nest of copperheads underneath one of the stairs going down to a trail of a very commonly used trail, and that scares me to death. And so anyway,
copperheads are not fun. You can't mess with.
They're
copperheads.
aggressive and mean, and they'll chase you,
right?
Like a rattlesnake,
and they're very
won't chase
venomous.
you. Yeah, very venomous.
Very venomous.
But one of the reasons, in addition to springtime, that I wanted to talk about snakes is because I recently finished a book called Salvation on Sand Mountain.
Wait a minute. We're going to talk about snake handling.
Well,
We have this.
I had to ease you into it.
We have this poor young woman in Italy who has somehow found our podcast, and all she knows about America are the three of us. And now she's going to think we handle snakes in our church services.
Do you know what that will do for our listenership?
This is an interesting story, though.
Yeah, so I learned a few things in this, and just kind of a fascinating topic anyway. And I'll tell you the premise of the book. So the book Salvation on Sand Mountain was written by a Birmingham author. I cannot remember his name, but the premise of the book is really around a murder trial. So I'll tell you about that. But historically, snake handling, as it became integrated into religion, is relatively new. So according to this book, it became a phenomenon in about the 1950s. And guess where it started?
Alabama, I would say. It has to be.
Well, the joke's not on Alabama this time. Sail Creek, Tennessee.
No.
Well, that's just right up the street from us.
No.
Right up the street from us.
That is like 10 minutes or 5 minutes from where I live.
Yeah, so be careful. It's a good thing you found our church, Sam.
Yeah.
I've always
dodged a snake there.
Exactly. I've heard a lot of people say, you pull a snake out in that church, you're going to get yourself a new door for free in this church. But interestingly, so it did start kind of as a as a movement with a preacher who was, of the what we would maybe the holiness kind of movement. I don't want to say Pentecostal. I'm not sure that those are the same thing, and I certainly don't want
Definitely charismatic.
Yeah, a very charismatic type person, and taking his taking the scripture from Mark, saying that you'll take up serpents and you'll
Mark 16:18.
16:18, and you'll drink poisonous things and it won't harm you. And
there's that in Acts chapter 28 near the end of Acts when Paul gets shipwrecked on this island and he gets bit by the snake, and the barbarians see that he doesn't die,
right,
and they're like, "Oh, you're God," and he's like, "No, I'm not."
So I guess that's how venomous this snake was, because that's what I was reading that yesterday,
and so not to get into a debate as to whether you should or shouldn't. I mean, I know we don't. I hope we never do. But this is not to chastise those that do. If if your belief is your belief, like, just keep those snakes at your church and we'll be good.
What would Neil Young say about this? I'm just wondering.
Oh man. I bet he could get into a snake handling ceremony.
Neil, leave us a review if you want. We'll definitely read it on the podcast if you do. So
I bet he secretly listens to Spotify when nobody's around.
What if he secretly listens to Joe Rogan? That would be really funny.
And Leonard Skinner.
He's like, this is pretty good.
I bet he loves Leonard Skinner. But here's the thing, and this isn't about getting into why people do or do not handle snakes. It's just from a historic fact they do. And it has come into a lot of these churches, and there's a lot of that book really hits a whole lot of the history and the why, and why people kind of feel the need to do this. But here's what the book's about. There was a pastor. This is up around Sand Mountain, the Fort Payne, Scottsboro area, named Glenn Summerford, who was a preacher of one of these churches, and they were pretty tight knit. Like, there's not a lot of these, so they fellowship with each other, and so the folks from North Carolina may come down, and then vice versa, and they have a lot of meetings together. And not everybody does it. Not everybody touches and handles the snakes, but some of them are really kind of known, like this is their thing. Like, who these people are. They're kind of the quote rock stars of the church, and.
Are they poisonous snakes?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Dude, we're not talking about grass snakes. We're talking about full-grown rattlesnakes and copperheads.
I love snakes. I'll handle any snake. But
if you bring a snake in here at any time, you've seen the last of me.
Just tell me next time you have somebody visiting our church, and I'll just
don't even bring a rubber one in.
Bring out
there's already.
I actually thought about doing that for the podcast.
Already think that anyway. Just when they
I thought about doing that just for the podcast, just like throwing out a rubber snake at random point as we were talking about it.
We've run out of things to talk about, so we're just going to be throwing snakes on each other.
So interestingly, man, this is a weird story. This preacher, according to the book, is probably a little bit of a philanderer.
Like a womanizer?
A little bit of that. Yeah, a little bit of that. Maybe taking that celebrity status just a little too far. But as many kind of adulterous men will do, what do? They start blaming their wives for being the one who's unfaithful.
Nice.
So he does that. He starts really chastising his wife and telling her she's cheating on him and all this stuff.
Preaching about adultery.
Yeah. Well, doing it himself, and then again, this is all according to the book and the trial notes. I don't know what that guy did or didn't do, but what he did was, after becoming very accusatory toward his wife, and got on kind of a drunken binge later for a few days. So none of these sound like preacher stuff anyway. But basically what the guy does is he gets so mad at her that he takes her.
Him? James just pulled up a video. Is that him?
Oh, I have no idea.
I'm telling you, it's crazy.
That guy was a womanizer?
Well, again, there's a lot of material in this. Sam. But he is so angry at his wife that he takes her out to their shed where they keep the snake boxes.
Oh, my goodness.
And he forces her hand into a snake box and forces a bite. God. And basically in hopes that she will die. And so he was going to have a pretty good alibi. Well, like, we just get bit all the time, and it happens, and they do. Like, people die in these churches.
Right, yeah.
And so he would have probably potentially gotten away with that, except for she didn't die. and her hand just starts swelling. So he starts driving her around, and he's mad, and he's telling her, I should have killed you. I should have dumped you in the river. All these things, and they come back home, and she says something about the hospital, and he's like, you won't get within a mile of a hospital as long as, I've got you. And so he takes her back home. She's not dead. She's sick, and he takes her back out there and forces another bite on her.
No way.
And then takes her to the kitchen and starts making her write her own suicide note, which would have, nobody would have ever seen through the multiple lines where she said, Glenn had nothing to do with this. Glenn was asleep. He was like creating his own alibi. Well, he ends up passing out, and
Why is he passing?
He was drunk.
Oh,
He'd been drinking all day.
Oh my God.
So she calls her sister, I think, and says, like, look, send an ambulance, but tell him not to come to the house. I'm afraid he'll wake up. I'll sneak out, and I'll run down to the neighbor's house, and they can kind of pick me up there. So she does. She gets an ambulance. She survives this snake bite. These multiple snake bites. And these are rattlesnakes, by the way, that were biting her.
Gosh.
And so they put him on trial, and he was convicted of attempted murder. And
good.
Yeah, so he went to prison. I guess he's in prison right now. And
one, good for her for having the courage to step up for stand up for that, because some people get trapped in that kind of cycle, and they're like, oh, he didn't mean it, or
I tell you that even not as weird, but almost to me equally as weird is the guy that wrote the book. Is I think he was a Methodist from Birmingham. I need to look his name up, but he starts talking about going to all these services and kind of getting caught up in it a little bit, to the point that toward the end he actually handles some snakes. And he says, like, look, I wasn't doing this for show. I was truly caught up in what he felt like was the Holy Spirit, which I think was maybe adrenaline. But nonetheless, he's up there handling these snakes. And, apparently they can do it, and the snakes don't. I think for the number of times they hold them, the snakes seldom strike. Like, I don't think they are naturally aggressive trying to strike the person holding them.
Right.
Because they're jumping around and dancing, and it's weird.
Well, one of the things so I don't want to be like bashing churches, but a lot of people will hear that story, or they'll go watch there's some videos on YouTube, there's some documentaries from years and years and years ago about these snake handling churches. And you can go watch those, and you can kind of have this kind of judgmental attitude about it. You can be like, oh, those backwoods hillbilly people. But in reality, there's a lot of showmanship to like church, just ecclesiology anyway. I mean, they're and you might say, well, our church showmanship is not like that. It's but
it's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, almost every church that I've ever been a part of, it's performative. There is a performative aspect to it. And I don't know if it's let's have a competition from the church down the street who can have the most rock piercing, ear piercing rock and roll music, which is common. You see that more and more. Or I literally read about a church in the Southern Baptist Convention, in a large church that sent like delegates to the convention, and had like a lot of preeminence there. But they literally had a youth wing that they hired some folks from Nickelodeon to come in and like create a youth church. And they literally had a little small baptistry where they could baptize their children, and it was a fire truck. And so
I thought you were going to say they did it with that slime.
Well, no, they actually had that. They had that though. And during services, they would get the kids all hyped up, and they would drop slime and like confetti and stuff. And literally, when you had a little 8-year-old get convinced to go in and get baptized in the fire truck, like confetti would shoot out of the hose and sirens would go off. I mean, how is that any worse? I mean, I guess it's snake handling is deadly, but. It's still, if you look at it for really what it is,
deadly for the soul.
It's
though,
just, yeah, that's right. It's showmanship.
Yeah.
And so you can get caught up in that, and
I love the argument, because I've heard this argument several times from different like big churches, even here in Chattanooga. It's like the idea of like, the world puts on some great rock concerts, and if we, who have the Spirit of God, how much more should we be putting on better rock concerts? It's literally like, it's that attitude.
Right.
And it's like,
Yeah.
I feel like the verse, we wrestle not with flesh and blood, we don't use I may be mixing verses here, but like where it talks about, we do not fight with the weapons of this world.
Right.
I think that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
I think people forget that. It's like, it's not our job to like beat the culture at its own game. I don't think that's our role.
Doctrinally, we could, get into a lot of deep discussion, and it would probably would end up sounding like a lot of bashing. So for the sake of this podcast, I'm going to try to save our viewers and listeners from that. But I will, I will tell you just a couple of funny quips on that. I was reading a series of books called the Foxfire series. You ever read those? They're so good.
No, I haven't heard of it.
A lot of the Foxfire series. I can't even remember. I think maybe they were published out of like North Carolina or something. But it's a series of practical books, and from anything from woodworking to foraging in the forest to all these other things. But one of them was actually just on religion and all the different religions in the kind of the Southeast and the Appalachian area, and just kind of what is it different about them? Why do they believe what they believe? All these things. And one of them, I'll get the denominations wrong, so I won't mention them. But it basically said these two different denominations both had revival the same week. And so the Sunday they were all preaching. So the preacher got up and said, "Well, we had our revival this week, and nobody got saved, but don't y'all worry." Said they had theirs, and nobody got saved over there neither. Like it was competition.
Like there's a quota.
Yeah.
That reminds me, I heard that there was this a priest, a rabbi, and a vicar walk into a bar.
Oh boy.
And the bartender says, "What is this? Some kind of joke?"
I've heard that one.
So one of the tenets of kind of that holiness thing is casting out demons. And so I was just kind of thinking about the logical, you go to church with people and you see them in church, and then like you leave and you see them again, sometimes at the restaurant or the Walmart or the Dollar General, wherever. And, but I was just thinking about the dynamic of like, if one of your members has a demon cast out, and then you see him like 2 hours later at Kentucky Fried Chicken, you're like, you got to be like, well, I mean, it's just got to be kind of awkward, like
they're flailing around and like,
yeah, like 2 hours later, you're just like, I'll take a, 3-piece.
I was watching something today with Kenneth Copeland. You guys ever remember that guy?
Oh gosh, remember he still exists.
Oh, is he still actually?
Oh, he's still around.
He's got
Kenneth
there's
Copeland.
there was
good
have you seen the
YouTube videos of him?
The Tube of Demons? That guy.
Yeah. It's kind of creepy. But he had this thing where he was trying to get people who were bald in his church to have their hair grow back.
No.
And so it's not funny, but just the way he was jumping up on stage with his hands like clasped on top of his head, and he was like.
My favorite one is the COVID-19. I blow you. Can I make an interesting? So I did a little bit.
Dr. Anthony Fauci was like, "We'll see about that, Kenneth."
I know, right? So in doing,
we designed this to be resistant to blows.
I was doing a little bit of biblical reading yesterday on the topic of snakes because I just kind of wanted to see, I looked at the Mark 16:18. I did a lot of.
Did you read it about the COVID-19 in there?
Yeah. But anyway, so one interesting, I read the Acts thing about Paul getting it. I read a couple commentaries on it.
Yeah, that was in our community. That was in our church Bible reading.
It was. Yeah.
That's where that came from.
That's where that came from.
Why was I looking up snakes?
I missed yesterday's Bible reading, so that's why I didn't catch that one. But one interesting verse that came up in one of the commentaries I was reading was Luke 10, specifically Luke 10:18 through 20. So he says, "I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Behold, I give unto you the power to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. Notwithstanding, in this rejoice not." So it's interesting. This is that the spirits are subject to you, but rather rejoice because your names are written in heaven. And I think that's a really good. So like, don't rejoice of that.
That you have this power
that
on
you
earth.
have this power.
Right.
So I thought that was a
That's
really
not your
interesting.
focus.
Like, if there was a verse to kind of potentially refute the snake handling thing, I feel like that might be it.
Yeah, because Christ is saying,
It's
you've got power
Yeah.
like you wouldn't even understand because of the
Yeah.
Holy Spirit.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean you have to go out there and tempt the Holy Spirit.
Right.
It's like,
And don't rejoice in the fact you have this power. Rejoice the fact that you're going to be in the Lamb's Book of, is it Lamb's Book of Life?
right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, I think it was a couple weeks ago about how, we've actually been designed to run long distances. That doesn't mean you should. You know what I'm saying? It's the,
Rejoice not in this. Rejoice
yeah,
that
don't
there
rejoice
is
that you could go run a
some
marathon.
donuts from Dunkin' Donuts
No,
on
it's
Signal
just like
Mountain.
rejoice that you don't have to run the marathon.
Yes. I just want to go back and see if anyone caught this. Do you see what happened because of the time change? Just because of that
Sam
1
misses
hour,
Bible reading?
Sam misses Bible reading.
I did. I'm telling you.
So that in itself, like,
I was late to work. It was bad.
hey, revisit that. I had a thought on the time change, and it occurred to me.
It's about time.
It's about time. He'll be here all day, folks. It just occurred to me that from a compliance standpoint, like Americans, we're pretty like divided on compliance about things, and
That's true.
like we just almost every issue there's a division, but for whatever reason, we're told set your clocks forward, and everybody just does it.
Yeah, the scariest thing is when Republicans and Democrats, those people in Washington, when they all agree on something, you're screwed. So
Right.
you're like, oh no.
You're getting sold out to China.
That's like no. I mean, I know there's some states that don't observe it, but as individuals, everybody's like,
I am.
okay, we're good.
Wait, there are states that do
there are
not.
Arizona, Hawaii, and
Indiana,
I heard
I
Indiana
think.
recently. So I want to lead the charge in Tennessee.
Wait, how have I never?
I
Oh,
wanna
the
lead the
entire
charge.
state of Arizona and Indiana.
They do not
They
participate.
just say, forget it. We're not doing the time
because
change.
it kills people.
20% uptick. in
And again,
our-
how do you keep up with it? I mean, like,
yeah, no joke.
John Roberts is a congressional candidate in Alabama, and he is definitely he did a video on it the other day. Like, let's be done with this. Once we move forward on this time, let's just stop and
I
never do it
love
again.
it.
Yeah,
I mean, I definitely think like what End Abortion Now and stuff is doing, that's more important. But can this be the second? We get all the
Let's
abortion
stop
bills
murdering
done.
children,
Well,
and
then
then
we're
let's
gonna
fix
stop
the
this.
time change issues.
any policy has good consequences and unintended consequences.
Tell me
And
the bad
I'm afraid
consequences,
that if
Eule.
we do this, and we're all for it. I mean, we're all for it. But Sam, if your chickens stop laying eggs because we mess with that clock, hey, true story. My wife had an aunt who was something else. And this lady was very routine. Like, she was always stuck on exactly, her routine. And she ate at a certain time. And there were stories that, like, if you came to her house and it was like dinner time, she'd kind of give you that look like, well, it's about time for you to go. It's time for me to eat. And
I'm about to get up and get my Nutri-System.
yeah. And so, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, her dinner time was around like 4:30. And so, and apparently she was one of these that she wanted to go to bed at dark and she wanted to wake up at daylight. And so when the time changed, she was going to bed at like 3:30 in the afternoon. And it's like, because it's getting dark at like 4:30. She's like getting ready to go to bed. And her quote was, "You can change those clocks, but you can't change your body."
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Did you hear
So
about that bag boy over at the Bilo down the street? No, this is a true story. Why are you laughing? There's this. This happened just
Whenever
I'm
it
laughing
starts-
because the image that I conjured was a bagpipe guy.
So there was this guy down at the Food City down the street. His name was Artie. You guys didn't hear about this?
No, all of a sudden the business changed.
So
True
you're
story?
talking about the It used to be Did I say Bilo?
You did say
Bilo.
I'm an
Food
old
City.
timer here. Our grocery stores have been bought out several times, but so now it's Food City. But anyway, yeah, this just happened. This guy named Artie. He's kind of like your wife's aunt, just very regimented, just kind of guy that. He'd been a bagger his whole life, apparently. Everybody knew that when Artie bagged up your groceries, you had to give him a $1 tip. Everyone in the town, everyone did it, right?
Yeah.
Y'all didn't hear about this?
No.
So anyway, these guys came in, I think they were on business or something from out of town, and they came in and they bought some groceries, and Artie bagged up their their groceries. And he went out to their car, and he they lifted the trunk. He loaded the groceries in there, and so anyway, he walks off, and he's like, wait, where's my $1?
Right.
And they didn't know. They didn't give him $1, and he flipped out. Like he couldn't process that somebody wasn't giving him $1. He looked down in the trunk, and there was an extension cord in the trunk. Y'all didn't hear about this?
I've not heard about it.
No.
He actually grabbed that extension cord and he strangled all 3 of them. Y'all didn't hear this?
Is this a real story?
Yes, it was.
I still thought this was a joke.
No, it was in the paper yesterday. In the headline, artichokes 3 for $1 at Food City.
Do the punchline again.
Artichokes 3 for $1 at Food City.
Oh, me. We've taken a turn today. I was going to say Artie's probably a millionaire by now.
Yeah.
Poor Sam's like, is this a joke?
Well, Sam's a vegan, so the artichokes really resonate with him.
At first, I was like, I was all bought into this as like absolutely a joke. Then he's like, y'all didn't hear about this? And I'm like, wait, this is a real story?
No, this is real. And then he says, you didn't read about it in the paper.
Yeah, because nobody reads the
Is
paper
there still
anymore.
a paper?
A paper?
Oh my God.
Oh, good stuff. The other thing I find is interesting about snakes is if you ever mention one on social media, I think Sam just wet his pants. You ever mention a snake on social media, like it is, you talking about something taking off like wildfire. Like
why?
Everybody has a snake story.
Oh,
Everybody has a picture of a snake. Let me tell you about the time I saw a snake. Like nobody's ever seen a snake. But there's this one page up on Signal Mountain. It's kind of funny. There's a dictatorial type administrator of it, and people. There's actually an alternate page, really just to kind of make fun of how dictatorial this person is over a Facebook
Is this like
page.
a Nextdoor app thing, kind of?
Well, similar. I mean, but it's all on Facebook. So there are
okay.
these groups, and they're private. Like you get, you don't pay a membership, but you got to be in the club. You got to answer the right things. You have to live up there to be in them, I think, as or convince them that you do. And but anyway, there's this one thing. Like there are all these rules. This one page has all these rules. You don't do this. You don't advertise on any day but Friday. I'll probably get kicked off of it now. I mean, honestly, if she hears this, I'm good as gone.
She has a problem with vengeance.
Anyone who challenges her authority, I think she has a problem with. But she, one of the rules is if you're going to talk about a snake, you cannot post the picture as the primary thing. You've got to put it down in the comments because we don't want anyone to, I guess, like fall out of the recliner when they.
We don't want to trigger anybody with a picture of a snake.
That's it. And it's like, I mean, where have we gone as a society that I can't show you a picture of a snake, without having some sort of liability in it? It's like, I mean, if you don't like snakes, I mean, don't look at social media.
You shouldn't live in a mountainous town if you don't like snakes.
Well, and also, like, it's social media. It's not like, are you thinking a snake's just going to be jumping out of your screen at you or
like
something?
It's not a 3D
crazy.
picture.
I know.
But you better not do it. I'm telling you, if you do it and you challenge it, you're banished off that page.
I don't do it. I tell you, I don't do it.
You also, if you write about a road condition, you're supposed to like note the date and time, which is not a bad idea.
That's reasonable.
But
yeah, for
like,
sure.
Loosely enforce that. Like if somebody says there's a bad wreck on the W road, like I could probably look and say that was posted 2 hours ago. Like
that's true.
I've got enough reasoning ability to figure that out.
They're like, well, it's 2 years ago. It's probably still there. Actually, on the W road, it probably still is.
Hey, James, I know you're probably not a Facebooker, but for those of you that are,
we're Christian.
We're men.
A whole other.
What are you talking about, Eule?
A whole other topic that we can get into another day is old people on Facebook.
Oh yes,
We'll
break out that subreddit.
I mean, it is a fun thing to watch. Like people will write, price of asparagus at Food City.
Yeah, Google
as their status update. It's like, yeah, I think you meant that for your search engine, sir.
My only requirement is if it's a post about an old person, you can't put the picture of the old person up because that triggers
It might
me.
scare people.
Old people.
Well,
People
define
not at
old.
my exact age. I can't handle.
Are you talking about like Michael Caine old, or
Wait, is he the guy from Miss Congeniality? What a career he had.
I'm gonna find Michael Caine's worst movie for next week.
I'm pretty sure it's Miscongeniality.
The Have Y'all Heard About This podcast is produced by Play It By Ear Audio. Leave us a review, like us, rate us, or subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use. If you wish to contact us or you have a suggestion for the show, email us at hyhatpodcast@gmail.com.